incredibly lifelike mannequin catches the eye of passers-by as they peruse a small wedding boutique in Chihuahua, Mexico. Legend has it that the woman now known as La Pascualita, above, is the mummified daughter of Pascuala Esparza, the store's previous owner. Just by looking at the figure, you can see why. The pale complexion of La Pascualita reminds me of a loved one who has passed away and is resting in a casket. Her luminous, glassy eyes watch you as you go by at night, seemingly inviting you to come back. La Pascualita has met many friends and foes in Chihuahua throughout her 80 years of standing at the shop. As they peruse the aisles of dresses, future brides have felt the mannequin's eyes fixed on them. The spectral bride reportedly changes places throughout the night, according to passers-by. La Pascualita's terrible reported demise is heavily influenced by her weird history. The beautiful daughter of a shopkeeper named Pascuala Esparza was engaged to be married to her beloved sometime in the 1930s, but her identity has since been forgotten. A black widow spider struck the beautiful bride on her wedding day, which was a little unfortunate. She passed away as the venom worked its way through her system. A fresh, unidentified mannequin showed up in front of La Popular, a wedding boutique, not long after the tragedy. It attracted the gaze of everyone passing by while dressed in a wedding gown befitting the spring season. A mysterious grin adorned her waxen lips as genuine hair flowed from her veil and rouge warmed her cheeks. The mannequin was perfect in every way. Word spread. It was widely believed that the owner had gone insane and embalmed his daughter's body so that she would remain physically close to him forever. After then, a string of unexplained occurrences involving La Pascualita began to circulate among the townspeople. A French magician, who was hopelessly in love with a mannequin, is the hero of one fantastical story. In the evening, he paid her a visit and revived her with his magical powers. They partied and danced all night long, rejoicing in their brief time together. After the sun came up, La Pascualita would always return to her position behind the window, where she would remain still until her sorcerer came back. Many have paid homage to La Pascualita over the years. Some have even composed songs about her or claimed to have seen miracles while praying at her feet. However, workers are less enthusiastic about collaborating with the enigmatic bride. The people in charge of changing La Pascualita's clothes claim they hate doing it since the mannequin's icy hands make them sweat as they take off each item and put on the newest style. The change happens twice a week. Although many are trying to figure it out, La Popular's current owner would rather leave things mysterious. In 1970, the U.S. military tested missiles near Green River, Utah. 2 tiny canisters carrying radioactive cobalt-57 were carried by the multi-stage rocket. It was fired at New Mexico's White Sands Missile Range. The rocket crashed into Mexico's Mapimi Preserve due to a malfunction. The U.S. authorities investigated for weeks to identify the rocket, create a road, and remove the debris. So goes the tale. Why a rocket might overshoot its target by almost 1.5 times its planned distance, when missile fuel loads are generally properly estimated, is only the beginning of the issues. The marker isotope cobalt-57 is utilized in medical testing, not missile tests. The missile was used to launch test payloads, not military payloads. The rocket's landing site has been the subject of many tales since then. Most notable is the narrative that made the region the silent zone. Some places around the rocket crash site can't receive radio signals. Most locations without radio transmissions are caused by height, rugged terrain, and a lack of transmitters. The Mapimi silent zone is level with tiny slopes. It is also within range of numerous border blaster radio stations, which amplify their transmissions to reach the U.S. These stations are unpickable in the quiet zone. Not even static. All radio bands remain silent until you exit these radio voids. Physical peculiarities exist. Some desert plant breeds have odd colorations. Scrub vegetation with very enormous growth patterns, and green cactus with bright purple or dark violet hues have been seen. Local tortoises have triangular shell patterns. Wild coyotes are especially huge, and little desert lizards are much larger than in other locations. Blood tests on these animals and nearby residents indicated atypical blood cell patterns, including rounded triangular forms. Local geology is also unique. Some silent zone pebbles and rocks contain rare metals, including ruthenium, rhodium, and, most notably, technetium in trace levels. Technetium is not naturally occurring, and practically all isotopes decay to ruthenium in seconds to minutes, making these findings highly surprising. The few fragments with technetium-97, a reasonably stable isotope, show a broad range of origin dates when decay rates are evaluated, suggesting no one event was the source. Strange magnetic fields cause compass needles to spin erratically. These magnetic anomalies may draw ferrous rocks and pebbles. Unusual activity in the vicinity is the most alarming element of the location. The zone has seen strange lights and radio wave bursts. Lights and radio wave bursts occur above and below the silent zone. Visitors report odd images and oral hallucinations. An old biological research station on the site has a high staff turnover and abandonment rate, with researchers occasionally departing during shifts. In April 2013, conspiracy and paranormal picture forums posted images of a handwritten notebook page. No film of these events has ever been released. Researcher Hector Alvarez saved these pages in a hidden diary. He wrote about the extraordinary event he saw while working alone on the station graveyard shift. He says he began the diary after complaining about weird occurrences he witnessed being disregarded by higher-ups and failing to capture them with a digital camera due to a system memory issue. The notebook covered 3 months of activity and different occurrences. Minor phenomena included some of those listed. In addition, the station's weather sensors showed unusual wind and barometric pressure readings. Despite normal weather, this suggested harsh circumstances. Random paint discolorations occurred inside and outside the building. These discolorations were usually somewhat triangular, but their hue and placement were random. Several of his disturbances were serious. There were several observations of luminous triangles. He couldn't offer an exact measurement, but they seemed to be 6 feet wide each time. Triangles appeared abruptly, often with strange noises and airflows. These triangles had prismatic-colored fire edges and transparent, undulating bands of changing hues within. Alvarez thought there was a pattern to these changes, but he didn't know why. After many minutes, these triangles vanished with the same strange noises and air disturbances. After observing 6 of these triangles, he noticed that they were all equilateral and slanted at 15 or 105 degrees, suggesting a regular pattern. He also described a time when all the station's computer's speakers made a jumbled white noise despite being off. The transmission continued after the computer speakers were disconnected. The following day, some of these machines wouldn't come on, and the technician said the motherboards and hard drives looked like they had melted under intense heat. The diary unexpectedly stops after 3 months. The Mapimi Preserve officials only said Mr. Alvarez departed his station the night of March 15, 2013, and did not return the next night. After referring the case to local police, no leads were found. Their inquiry revealed 2 intriguing things. Mr. Alvarez's automobile was at the research station the morning after he vanished. Second, a big triangular wall discoloration detected the following morning emitted trace radiation. Walls contain technetium isotopes, according to lab analysis. The levels of isotopes present suggest they originated the night Mr. Alvarez vanished. The domineering Spaniard made it clear that he wanted his daughter Anna to marry a rich guy. His ambitions for her were so focused that he would do everything to prevent her from talking to anybody he thought was too impoverished. But then she met Carlos, a charming but modest miner, while she walked the streets of Guanajuato one day, and the two fell head over heels. Ana met with Carlos behind his father's back, against his desires. Nevertheless, Ana's father pursued her and discovered the two of them together after hearing tell of their encounters. Ana was imprisoned in her bedroom by her enraged father, who vowed to marry her off to a wealthy, elderly Spanish lord. Carlos went to see Ana at her residence after being torn apart from his love. Upon arrival, he saw that Ana's bedroom was situated in a tiny passageway, and that another house, with a balcony facing her bedroom, was within touching distance. Carlos approached the home's owner with a fresh sense of optimism and made a bid to buy the property. The proprietor insisted on a higher price and declined. Once again, the owner turned down Carlos's increased offer. Once again, Carlos increased his offer, but the owner still turned him down. The owner, who was beginning to become impatient with Carlos's incessant praising, felt Carlos would finally go away once he cranked up the praise level. Nevertheless, Carlos gladly paid the guy with all of his remaining coins. He beckoned to his beloved from his new home, which was within touching reach of Ana's bedroom window. After committing to seeing one other every night, the two hugged. But Ana's dad walked into her room one night as the couple was in the middle of a passionate kiss. In a furious rage, the father saw his daughter in the arms of the poor miner and killed her by grabbing a knife and stabbing her in the chest. According to others, Carlos tried to leap from his window into Ana's bedroom in an effort to save his beloved, but he fell to the floor, broke his neck on the third step, and never recovered. According to other accounts, he took his own life in La Valenciana mine after being so devastated by the sight of Ana's corpse. Located in Guanajuato, Mexico, the House of Laments is a landmark of historical significance. 18th-century architecture may be seen throughout the residence. The occurrence of the Tadeo Fulgencio Mejia serial killings took place in this location throughout the years 1890s and 1900s. He was a Mexican serial murderer because he was driven by the need to make touch with his wife, who had passed away. The home is now used as a museum, and, according to the urban legend, it is said that the mansion is the site of a number of supernatural occurrences. It was during the 18th century that the Marquis of San Clemente gave the order for the building of the palace, which was intended for his daughter. During the 19th century, the house served as a post office until the year 1890, when Tadeo Fulgencio Mejia, a mining engineer working for Decata y de Mellano, acquired the building. In 1890, Constanza de la Rivera, Tadeo Mejia's wife, tragically passed away as a result of an assault. According to some accounts, the homicide of Constanza took place during a home invasion that was planned by workers of the mine where Mejia worked. These employees accused him of malversation, but in reality, the mine was experiencing an economic difficulty, which is the reason why the wages were delayed. The neck of Constanza was wounded with a knife. According to the assumption, Tadeo Mejia's insanity was brought on by her passing. A witch was contacted by him, and she revealed to him unusual rites that involved the sacrifice of young men and women as human sacrifices. Although the number of killings perpetrated by Tadeo Mejia remains unclear, it was discovered that the basement of the home contained a lot of human bones. A Catholic saint in Mexico's Guadalajara is the subject of ghostly rumors. The martyr Santa Inocencia supposedly opened her eyes and stared into the camera of a visitor who came to see her at the Guadalajara Cathedral. You may find her in the cathedral. Somebody apparently recorded the child opening her eyes while looking at the body on their iPhone. The individual claims they didn't see the body open its eyes while filming, but when they watched the footage with their family, they saw it clearly. The Mexican girl, known as the girl in the cathedral, was really called Inocencia, and she wanted to be a part of the first communion rite after hearing her classmates speak about it. But her father slapped her and forbade her from engaging in such nonsense when she revealed her intention to become a Christian. Still, a nun who discovered Inocencia listening outside the catechism sessions persuaded her to take the Eucharist, and she was captivated by the teachings. "And friend of virtue is preferable than an enemy of evil," the nun said. On the special day, the nun blessed Inocencia with the Eucharist and bestowed upon the girl a delicate white lace garment. She returned home and proceeded to inform her father, since she could not suppress her delight. He was so enraged by the news that he stabbed his daughter in the chest, or stomach, when she discovered him in the kitchen. Neighbors discovered Inocencia's corpse after the perpetrator escaped after committing this murder. After her last rites of communion, they returned her to the cathedral to lay her to rest. The corpse of Santa Inocencia was originally scheduled to be placed in a convent in Mexico after being discovered in the Roman catacombs in 1786, according to Pregunta Santoral, which offers an alternative version of the narrative. Its current home in the cathedral is a result of political maneuvering. According to this source, the idea of representing a young martyr in a white gown was an afterthought at some point during this voyage, and it is likely that this mythology originated from this. La Habitación Obscura combines the two tales to tell the tale of Santa Inocencia, a Roman girl whose father had her beheaded because she had become a Christian. The catacombs of Rome received her remains, and centuries later, they were discovered in an almost undamaged condition. The mystery surrounding a possibly paranormal occurrence at Santa Inocencia continues. This beatified saint is known for making miracles, and this is just one of the many. Cardinal Juan Francisco Robles reportedly told La Obscura Habitación when discussing the tale. But, like many other purported paranormal occurrences, the authenticity of the video showing her seemingly opening her eyes is up for question on the internet. The video is supposedly false, according to some observers. Others counter that believers don't want an explanation. People who aren't sure whether it's real or not, and those who are afraid of demonic powers are both present. In the 1800s, the vampire tree legend began in El Carrizal's Barranquitas area. Residents reported a nightly succession of tiny animal fatalities. The deaths seemed normal at first. The phenomena lasted for weeks. Each animal carcass had 2 closely spaced punctures, which were discovered after an inquiry. Additionally, the body was bloodless. This catastrophe soon spread to children, particularly infants. Dead, marked, and bloodless kids were found in cribs by mothers. Townspeople were forced to stay inside after nightfall. Locals, known for their nightlife, raced home to pray each night to conjure heavenly forces to exorcise this supernatural monster from the city. Weary of the assaults, a devoted group went out one evening to find and kill the vampire-like army. The legend splits into 3 here. In one scenario, the mob gathered suspects and singled out a pale white vampire-like guy. They staked his heart to murder him. Another version has the mob invading houses and putting a stake into the heart of a guy sleeping in bed. Both versions indicate the corpse was carried to Santa Paula Cemetery. Another version sees the guys trapping a demon stalker. The creature dies as they transport its corpse to Santa Paula Cemetery and puncture its heart with a long stick. The body was encased in a large concrete plate the next morning. Months later, the wooden spike intended to kill pierces the concrete surround and grows into a big tree. Lore holds that cutting the tree trunk will release vampire blood, hidden underneath, or that breaking a branch would spill blood and leave a crimson deposit on the skin. The tree has grown for approximately 200 years. its massive roots twist and wrap over graves and monuments. The vampire will escape and seek vengeance on Guadalajara when this gnarl breaks the barrier slab. In a death-stricken area, this tree is caged in to survive. The Panteon de Santa Paula Cemetery, in a northern district of Guadalajara's old center, houses the tree. The Panteon de Belen is noted for its eclectic architecture, more famous for its tales. Post-Mexican War of Independence famines and epidemics, cholera in particular, killed a substantial section of Guadalajara's population. More graves were required for the victims. In 1843, Bishop Diego Aranda y Carpintero asked that the Hospital of St. Michael's Orchard become a cemetery. The famous architect Manuel Gómez Ibarra designed and built the site in 1848. Gómez Ibarra was hired 30 years earlier to redesign the earthquake-damaged Cathedral de Guadalajara spires. The bought property had 2 patios, one for the poor, one for the rich. After the cemetery closed in 1896, the impoverished area was utilized as a hospital and razed in 1967, since most of the tombs were unidentifiable. The rich's land is now a museum. The Panteon de Belen's magnificent tomb is a 120-foot tiled pyramid. Egyptian-inspired, its above corners include 4 weeping ladies sculptures. Jalisco dignitaries are buried in a 64-slot subterranean chapel underneath this memorial. José Rolón, composer. Joaquín Angulo, Jalisco Forum member and governor. Ignacio Herrera y Cairo, physician and advocate of indigenous land rights. And others were put there. After being buried until 1957, the corpses were moved to the Rotonda de los Jaliscienses Ilustres, several blocks distant. 2 of the 4 arcades were erected during site building. Both northern and western colonnade halls have 50 arches. The northern wall has 15 burial niches between each pair of arches, whereas the western wall has 18. Cantera stone columns with Ionic finishes line the 2 colonnades. Within the courtyard, about a city block, are graves, markers, and funerary monuments of diverse architectural types. The cemetery operated for 50 years. Another Panteon de Belen folklore is about the dark phobic youngster. May 24, 1882. A threatening storm was headed toward Guadalajara. Parents prepared 10-year-old Ignacio Torres Altamirano, Nachito, for bed. He was scared of the dark, so his parents and grandparents usually put 2 blazing torches outside his bedroom window. He slept open-windowed. Each flame was extinguished that night by severe winds. Mom entered Nachito's bedroom in the morning. She ran to her son's bedside when she felt the cold. She discovered Nachito frozen and dead. Doctors eventually found that Nachito died of a heart attack in the evening, possibly from his pathological dread of the dark. Rumors arose that Nachito's heart had erupted in his chest, and that a curse or demons caused his death. El Panteon de Belen, a local cemetery, received the boy's casket. The following morning, cemetery officials discovered his casket exhumed and placed next his grave. In shock, his parents begged caregivers to bury him again. Second morning after funeral, the casket was discovered on the ground again. 9 mornings followed this pattern. No cause was found. His parents believed Nachito's terror of the dark drove him to the light. Even after death, his underground location terrified him. His parents purchased a stone casket with 4 short pillared legs to keep his corpse off the ground and expose it to sunlight. The tomb was above ground at the gravesite. Nachito's folklore captivates cemetery visitors today. Some have seen a boy or balloons hanging above the cemetery, as if carried by a kid. Most popular is the idea that Nachito is a talisman. People give him a little toy and a hidden desire. Tragedies await everyone who removes a toy until it is returned. No one knows whether the little ball that slid away from and returned to the tomb is real. his popularity prompts many offerings to appease Nachito. Cemetery workers often remove and donate toys to local hospitals for terminally sick children to empty the tomb. Video of the ghost is in the description. In reality, the event took place in November of 2016, but Francisco Hernandez is telling the media that he is just coming up now because he has heard of other incidents that are like to this one that have occurred at the same airport. Another way of putting it is that he wants those other individuals who are going through this to understand that they are not insane. At about 3 a.m, at the conclusion of his shift, he stepped on board the empty aircraft for a security review. This is when the incident took place. Due to the fact that he had heard the doors of the airplane pounding, it was his responsibility to investigate. It should come as no surprise that he did not expect to stumble encounter a ghost, as you might imagine. At one point in the video, he can be seen strolling down the cabin while flashing his light on the aisle. When he arrives at the location that is designated for supplies, he examines it along with the restroom on the premises. Then, as he is making his way back into the aisle to exit the aircraft, he hears a noise and turns around to identify the source of the distraction. It is at that moment that he becomes aware of a shadowy figure that is moving in and out of view at the end of the hallway, and he immediately flees in fear. At first, I was unsure of what it was that I was making out. I hushed myself and said, "What is this?" I even moved forward a few feet, because I believed it may be a trick of the light, Hernandez recounts. I thought it might be a trick of the light. The moment it began to move back and forth on its own, however, I realized that I was not making it up. When I saw what I saw that night, it completely frightened me, and I hurried away in fear for my life. It has been difficult for me to come out with my tale since there are not many people who believe what I say. The individual continues. However, I was fortunate enough to record the occurrence, which allowed me to play it back and verify that I was not imagining it. Had I not done so, I would have had my own reservations about what I witnessed that evening. Urban legend exists in Chapultepec, Mexico, which is generally referred to as the Bosque de Chapultepec, and it tells the story of an elderly lady, her home, and the people that visit her. According to the tradition, Tia Tona, an elderly lady of great fortune, resided in a home located in the Chapultepec forest environment. According to the telling of the tale, Tia Tona was left a widow following the passing of her husband, who was a prosperous trader. She was so heartbroken after the passing of her husband that she made the decision to give her inheritance, which consisted of a beautiful house and a significant amount of money, to the children of the city who were without a home. The tale continues in a variety of ways once the children move into the house, and these perspectives vary from person to person. The lady is said to have slain the children out of rage after discovering that they had stolen her money and jewels, according to one version of the folklore. She killed them by beating them to death and then dumping them into a ravine that was close to the estate and drowning them. One other account suggests that Tia Tona resorted to poisoning the children due to their lack of gratitude and their unfavorable treatment of her. As soon as she understood what she had done, she ended her own life by consuming the same poisoned food that she had consumed before. The third version of the tale, which is similar to the two that came before it, states that Tia Tona was responsible for the death of the children, but this time she used an axe to kill them. The youngsters were cruel and would take advantage of Tia Tona, and finally, her patience wore thin, causing her to lose her cool and lose her temper. Once her wrath had faded, she decided to kill herself out of a sense of remorse. In accordance with the USC Digital Folklore Archives, the tale takes a contrary stance, asserting that the children collaborated in order to murder Tia Tona in order to steal all of her money. After that, the children relocated the corpse of the mother into the attic. But not long after her passing, they felt as if they were being tormented by the vengeful spirit of the woman. At some point in time, the children would be driven out of the home by the ghost of the lady, which would ultimately result in their deaths. It was reported that the house was haunted by the souls of the children and Tia Tonya from that point on to the present day. As a result of the mythology, a great number of individuals have gone in search of the house with the expectation of having a supernatural encounter. Some individuals have proven that the home of Tia Tonya is haunted. They assert that a group of students lost their lives while attempting to cross the bridge that led to the entrance of Tia Tonya's mansion. Furthermore, they assert that if you are in close proximity to the house, you can hear the screams of the children who were abducted and killed. Famous Mexican and American ghost story from the Southwest. The spectral nurse from central Mexico's metropolitan hospitals is the protagonist of this eerie tale. An archaic nurse's attire is on display here. Various accounts of this tale exist. A story that has been recounted many times is this one. A connection to Mexico City's Hospital Juarez is implied in this tale. A nurse named Eulalia was employed at the institution during the 1930s. Her uniforms were spotless and pressed. The people who were fortunate enough to have her as a nurse were really fortunate. However, all of that changed when a dashing young doctor started working at the hospital. A social relationship developed between Eulalia and this doctor. Their love blossomed quickly, and Eulalia was soon engaged. They were engaged for a short time before the doctor departed for a medical conference. He failed to return the week after, much to Eulalia's dismay and worry. The doctor still hadn't replied after another week. Concern about Eulalia's safety was overwhelming. Something awful must have transpired, she thought to herself. The hospital didn't hear from the doctor for a few weeks. Apparently, he had met and married a lady in the town that held the conference. Eulalia fell into a profound despair when her heart shattered. Her job was negatively impacted by her overwhelming sadness. She began to disregard the well-being of the people entrusted to her care. As a direct consequence of her carelessness, one of her patients passed away one night. In the midst of her tragic mistake, Eulalia became unwell. Her lack of self-respect led her to succumb to her illness while on the job at the hospital. Mysterious occurrences began after her death. A nurse's presence in the emergency department became apparent to patients, nurses, and physicians. According to other accounts, she doesn't float around the hospital halls, but rather seems to glow. According to several onlookers, she seems to walk normally. However, it is mentioned in every one of these accounts that her footsteps are unheard. The phantom nurse became to be known as La Planchada by the hospital personnel, because to her consistent appearance in a well-maintained uniform. The most interesting things are the patient reports. In the hospital's emergency room, this spectral nurse not only makes appearances, but also provides care to patients. Supposedly, this nurse takes care of patients at night when other members of the hospital staff are too busy to pay attention to them. These patients are able to be transferred to less intensive care units in the morning since they are feeling better. In response to a question on their emotional state, they say, "A nurse came in and healed me." It is said that Eulalia's shame is the reason she comes back as a spirit nurse. It would seem that she would always have to pay the price for her life's error. Many tellings of this tale exist, as shown before. One telling has the nurse being damned to spend all eternity caring for her ill patients, since she was a horrible person who abused them. According to an alternate timeline, the young doctor turns down Eulalia's proposal and instead weds the lady he is engaged to. She vents her frustrations upon her patients as a result. Several of them perish as a consequence. Spanish Inquisition in New Spain in 1566, this mansion served as its headquarters. Construction of the current Baroque structure began in the early 18th century on the site's foundations. but the true draw is the building's ominous past. In fact, seeing this notorious structure that once sowed dread throughout the nation would be lacking on any tour of Mexico City's historic district. It was here that the enemies of Christianity were led through the massive doors to be tortured and imprisoned. Executions such as hanging, drawing, and quartering or burning at the stake were common methods of execution for these individuals. The residents of Mexico City, affectionately called the Palace Jail of Perpetuity, because of the very low survival rate of inmates. Many people were persecuted during the Inquisition, including women who were accused of witchcraft, the expanding population of Spanish ex-converso Jews who had supposedly returned to Judaism from Christianity, and the many rebels who had fought for political reform or independence from Spain. Occasionally, individuals accused of espionage for the competing colonial powers of England, Portugal, France, or Holland were also persecuted, along with a small number of courageous academics who advocated for the separation of religion and science, or who were accused of the misdeed of teaching controversial or heretical subjects that ran counter to established religious teachings. The colonial Spanish Empire in Mexico began to crumble towards the close of the 18th century. In 1820, after a brutal war of independence, Mexico was proclaimed an independent country following the Spanish defeat. People reportedly departed in tears, yelling, "God is going to punish us," as the establishment shut down, according to the accounts. After Mexico gained its independence, the palace was despised for its shady history, which led to its abandonment and subsequent dilapidated status for a long time. At auction, no one was interested in buying the structure, and an archbishop paid the lowest amount feasible for it 20 years later. In the years that followed, the structure changed ownership many times, serving as a boarding school, a lottery office, and a soldier's barracks. Ironically, it became the National School of Medicine in the 1850s. It is still in use by the school today, and it also serves as a museum with displays on Mexico's medical history. Who knows how many live in Mexico City's enormous city? Some demographers say 18 million, 20 million, some claim. Others say 25 million live there. The metro moves people around this megacity. The metro has 12 lines, 195 stations, and 140 miles of track since 1969. The metro transports 4 million passengers every day. Most places cost 5 pesos, or 25 cents US. The Mexico City Metro provides a space for collective expression, where diverse social sectors are compelled to mingle every day. According to Mexican journalist and cultural critic Carlos Monsiváis Aceves, ghost stories and urban legends flourish there. Metro Line 5, the Yellow Line, ends at Benito Juarez International Airport Terminal area. Mexico City's Yellow Line links Latin America's busiest airport to the city. The Terminal Area Metro Station serves tens of thousands daily. The weird occurrence has been noticed by many passengers. Story variety is low. Elementary school girl plays red ball. Ball bounces to unknowing experiencer. The child asks the stranger to tie her shoe after receiving the ball. The viewer sees the girl's legs and torso vanish as she ties her shoe. In other versions, the girl growls and her eyes darken before leaving, possessed. In one version, the girl's ball is her skull, and when the kind stranger catches it, they drop it in horror. Girl gone by then. The longest Mexico City subway line is olive-colored Metro Line 3. From Indios Verdes Station to Universidad, it runs north-south. People who have heard about strange creatures between Tlatelolco and La Raza stations visit a short northern tunnel stretch. Urban tales and eyewitnesses claim dog-sized rats attack people on the tracks. In the late 1970s, rumors spread that a pig-sized rat came from the tunnel and killed a tiny kid waiting for a metro train with her parents. Transit workers and visitors have reported a hunched-over furry humanoid prowling the semi-dark tunnels near Tlatelolco station. Similar species have been observed in tunnels south of Metro Line 3's Viveros station. Commuters nickname this creature Ratman. According to Metro commuters, the Ratman is making screaming sounds from Vivero station, south via tunnels to Miguel Angel de Quevedo. This story takes place at Pino Suarez station on Mexico City's pink and blue subway lines 1 and 2. The station is noteworthy for a discovered section of a 1490s Aztec pyramid dedicated to wind god Ehecatl. Tiki shrine was discovered during station construction in the late 1960s. A weird storyline repeats every few years at the station. Some years ago, this story was recounted. A Metro employee and station worker inspected the rails after the last train departed for the night. The worker was astonished to see someone else checking the rails and thought they were new and in the wrong place. The worker addressed them. A stranger said he examined the tracks after the last train left the station. Transport worker provided supervisor a phone picture of person. The supervisor was shocked to identify the mobile phone photo's subject. He died years ago when a runaway train killed him while inspecting metro tracks. Rail workers must face oncoming automobiles. The dead inspector changed direction and couldn't halt the rushing train behind him. The supervisor contacted several old-timers, who described seeing the cheerful ghost of the guy working decades after an injury. The last Line 7 Orange Line station is the backdrop for this horrible tragedy. The line ends at Barranca del Muerto, meaning ravine or gully of the dead. This station was built beside a mass burial of early 20th century Mexican Revolution warriors. Uneasy spirits prevail throughout the area. Barranca del Muerto begins when all metro trains stop early in the morning. A train passenger woke up alone in the car as the train halted in a tunnel overnight. After departing the train, he spotted two men fighting in the tunnel. Taller man seemed to be killing shorter man. The sleeping man approached the two guys to break up the fight and witnessed the larger man biting the bleeding neck. The man cried, "Vampire!" and ran to the nearest police station. Mocked for giving cops his story. Some say the man saw a nasty drunken fight. A confused human bit her, not a vampire. Others believe this story was fabricated to scare younger train passengers. Teens riding late-night trains may fall asleep. People in Mexico City may have remained up worrying about vampires on the last trains. The gray line joins the green line at Garibaldi, its northern end. This station is named after Plaza Garibaldi, a nearby monument to Francisco Madero's Mexican Revolution soldier, Giuseppe Garibaldi II. Although a common line transfer point, this station is nothing exceptional. Since the station opened in 1994, hundreds of tourists and transport staff have encountered a veil-wearing black woman. She occasionally slides softly over the platform and trails as a shadow. She sometimes seems scarier and uglier. An ugly old woman with a shroud intends to injure or cause problems. Parents beware. She takes abandoned kids to her urban nest. The ghost may be a little Spanish noblewoman whose family controlled the metro station's land during colonial times. Because of her infidelity or other wrongdoing, she will haunt Garibaldi Station. Mexico City's Blue Line crosses Tenochtitlan, 500 years ago's Aztec capital. Transportation workers and visitors have seen ghosts at Pino Suarez and Zocalo stations and tunnels. Most apparitions are Aztec men. Variations of this sighting may indicate ghosts or poorly seen occurrences. Every account says the ghost is male and wears pre-conquest indigenous attire. Many stories include the person grieving, maybe for a bygone period and place. Many versions of this tale show the gentleman greeting and talking to people. Nahuatl, the Aztec imperial language, survived the conquest and persists today. Just behind Quechua, Nahuatl has about 1 million speakers in central Mexico in the early 21st century. The Aztec ghost in the metro talks in his native language, so modern people understand him. He asks astonished commuters what happened and where he is in other occasions, seeming lost. He wants to combat the Aztecs as a jaguar knight. Another version has him wearing a peasant's cactus fiber tilma, sad about his beautiful city and modern life. Local media have documented some of these sightings, and many Mexico City residents think that these Aztec ghosts are real souls lost in our time, maybe puzzled, and wanting to return to their old capital city. On Tuesday, October 2nd, Mexico will commemorate the 1968 Tlatelolco Massacre. While many today see the quashing of the dissident student movement 50 years ago in Mexico City as a turning point for democracy, it really predicted one of the most restrictive decades in recent history. The government misused its power to jail and remove hundreds of young people in the 1970s and 80s in a desperate attempt to eliminate a Marxist threat in the Republic. The tragic events of October 2, 1968, began in July when the anti-riot police unit, known as the Granaderos, entered the campus of the private Instituto Politécnico Nacional, IPN, to break up a fight between IPN students and a group from Isaac Ochoa High School, incorporated into the public National Autonomous University of Mexico. Both colleges collaborated to dissolve the controversial police unit due to the officers' harshness. The following days saw multiple marches that brought together public and private students and professors for the first time. These protests became violent, with Granaderos again accused of using excessive force. Many universities across the nation supported the dissident movement in Mexico City as protests, marches, and police clashes continued throughout the month. Hostility toward President Gustavo Díaz Ordaz and the ruling Institutional Revolutionary Party, PRI, increased. Federal officials were embarrassed by the student demonstrations' timing. Mexico's officials hoped the October 12th Olympic Games in the capital would demonstrate the country's economic and social progress after World War II. As protests grew, the authorities became increasingly intransigent. The students had a major issue with Ordaz, who ordered the army and police to break up sit-ins at UNAM and IPN, resulting in violence and numerous arrests. Barros resigned as UNAM rector on September 23 after tanks dismantled a camp in the Zocalo, main plaza. UNAM rector Javier Barros Sierra led 50,000 students in a peaceful demonstration against government repression and academic autonomy violations on August 1st. Protests in Europe and the anti-Vietnam War movement in the U.S. inspired idealistic young men and women to speak out against their government. On October 2nd, thousands of students, professors, workers, and others peacefully gathered in the Plaza de las Tres Culturas in Tlatelolco, the capital's Tlatelolco neighborhood, to hear National Strike Committee members speak from the third-floor balcony of the after the demonstration began. An army chopper tossed a flare into the gathering of 10,000, sparking shooting from the apartment building's upper levels. Soldiers who had moved into the plaza from its boundaries fired on a terrified throng, fleeing the violence. After 30 minutes of shooting, dead littered the square. Soldiers swiftly took them away, searching the buildings and surrounding area and detaining hundreds of individuals, many of whom were sent to detention camps. In her acclaimed book, Massacre in Mexico, journalist Elena Poniatowska refuted the government's 32-death toll, which has long been questioned. While versions disagree on what happened that day and who fired the first shots from the apartment complex, it is clearly known that government infiltrators were at the meeting. Photographs and recordings eventually identified individuals as Olympia Battalion personnel, an elite anti-terrorism unit created to secure the Olympics. It is unclear whether they fired the rounds from the apartment block to confuse and irritate the troops. But there was no cooperation between the army and the Olympia Battalion on that tragic day. No firearms linked to accused agitators, who Mexican officials say started the shooting, were recovered in the apartment tower. Since the print and broadcast media worked with the Diaz-Ordaz administration to portray the students as the aggressors, the outcry against the slaughter was low. Tlatelolco resolved student protests and ensured a smooth Olympic Games. The slaughter's aftermath has shaped Mexico's social and political life. Mexico's dirty war was Diaz-Ordaz and his successors, Luis Echeverría and José López Portillo's brutal sweep of left-wing students and suspected guerrilla organizations. Government troops committed 1,200 forced disappearances, widespread torture, and likely unlawful killings with U.S. support. Change would come. The 1990s liberalized Mexico's restricted economy and gave the press greater independence, although the PRI remained in power until the end. President Vicente Fox of the Conservative National Action Party, PAN, pledged a truth commission to probe 1960s, 70s, and 80s atrocities in 2000, but it never materialized, and no one was convicted. High Court justices have rejected recent attempts to charge former President Echeverría, who was Interior Minister during the 1968 massacre, and others accused of directing soldiers to fire on students. Many explanations have been proposed about the government's role in the Tlatelolco massacre. Due to a lack of documented proof and a whitewash of the truth, nothing has been proven and likely never will be. However, the occasion reminds Mexicans to be aware of the vulnerability of their democracy and hold administrations accountable. The National Archive of Mexico is now housed in a structure that is of such a formidable repute that the locals refer to it as the Black Palace. Despite the fact that it is now an important government building, the Palacio de Lecumberri remains to be a notably identifiable landmark that stands tall in its menacing majesty. Having served as one of the most fearsome jails in Mexico in the past, this place has earned its notoriety even before it was responsible for holding significant parts of Mexico's history. The year 1900 marked the beginning of the Palacio de Lecumberri as a correctional facility, and it did not take long for the establishment to acquire a reputation for being unfavorable. It was widely believed that this jail was among the most difficult locations in the Americas to do time for a particular offense. Soon after, corruption took control of the building, which resulted in the imprisonment of a great number of innocent people and political prisoners. Over the course of the subsequent 76 years, the Palacio de Lecumberri saw a number of fatalities inside its walls, including those caused by suicide, murder, and illness. Some individuals believe that the gloomy past that the Black Palace has may be the cause of the paranormal activity that has been claimed to have occurred inside the structure up to the present day. There is a widespread belief that the Palacio de Lecumberri is among the most haunted locations in Mexico City. A large number of reports of ghostly activity that has been said to have occurred inside the building have been submitted by both the workers and the tourists. The thunderous cries of what can only be characterized as former inmates who are in anguish or who are undergoing torture is one of the most prevalent sensations that people have. The most common ghost tale that is recounted about the Palacio de Lecumberri, which is said to be haunted, is not remotely comparable to these disembodied noises, despite the fact that they are spooky indeed. The spirit of a prisoner called Don Jacinto is supposed to be the most prominent ghost that is said to haunt the old jail. The majority of the time, Don is seen strolling about the old cell blocks at night. In addition to that, he will often repeat the same statement over and over again, which is, again, Amelia didn't come. It has been said that Don was head over heels in love with Amelia while he was alive. She, on the other hand, betrayed him in the most heinous manner possible. Reportedly, she had an affair with him before she accused him of committing a murder that he had not committed. In spite of the fact that Emilia disapproved of him, it seems that his love for her has persisted throughout his time spent in prison and even into his afterlife. There are other interpretations of Don's narrative that portray him as the jail cleaner rather than a prisoner of the previous prison. As he continues to wait for Emilia to come to see him in the dead, Don continues to demonstrate the same level of love that he had for Emilia in the previous chapter. Regardless of whether or not this tale is true, it continues to be a topic of folklore that is connected to the Palacio de Lecumberri. Those members of the general public who are interested in gaining further knowledge about and seeing some of the most significant papers in Mexico may go to the Palacio de Lecumberri, which is a component of the National Archive. The structure is operated as a museum, and admission is free of charge. It is a fascinating location to see, particularly one that demonstrates how former prisons have been transformed into business buildings. In front of the statue of Saint Francis of Assisi, Fernando Saldaña Galvan, the man who refused to leave his creation, was hung lifeless from the bell tower of the chapel. Even now, many people think he's protecting the hotel he loved from any brave soul who dared to step foot within the historic Posada del Sol gates. The intriguing tale of the deserted hotel in Mexico City's Doctores area is based on either genuine events or urban legends. Countless tragic tales of murder, suicide, and other violent crimes are buried behind the concrete monster's walls. Intruders have stayed away from the building up until now, due to all the legends about Saldaña's ghost or the girl from room 103. This massive structure, which combines architectural and artistic currents, is an emblem of Mexico's architecture. The building's architect was an art enthusiast who envisioned it as a home and hotel for the intellectuals and artists of the day. But today, all that remains of what was once a wonderful haven of creativity, built with astounding proportions and intricate details, is rubble. Amidst the ruins, one may still find a wild garden, moldy windows, dusty walls, and gloomy basements. Among the hotel's ruins, there is a stunning church. The hallowed spot is guarded by two stone sculptures, one of Saint Francis of Assisi and the other of a wolf, that have seen the structure deteriorate. As the Posada del Sol was being constructed, Saldaña allegedly accrued incalculable debts. He committed himself in the tower of the church after reportedly killing his wife and children and declared bankruptcy. Maybe this explains why an altar has been erected to pacify the spirit of a small girl who supposedly haunts the hallways leading to room 103. The hotel's construction, with its double walls and hidden hallways, contributes to the supernatural aura, which is already there in the narrative. After all these years of abandonment, the neighbors of the long-abandoned Posada del Sol swear they still hear screams of terror emanating from the building at night. The place's visual richness, which combines Art Nouveau and Baroque forms, entices people intrigued with the structure and its history, in addition to the paranormal phenomena. Even with all the rubble and wreckage, you can still make out the various rooms of the hotel, the exquisite bathrooms, the round bar, the little theater, and the beautiful metal plaques that numbered each room. Those few, maybe less fortunate visitors, however, talk with genuine terror of the subterranean level. In this chamber, you can see black and white checkered tiles, enormous columns supporting the ceiling, and the remnants of a hotel chimney. Balconies that look out over a large garden and the dome of the church are also part of Saldaña's idea. There are a number of symbols and words on the walls of the chapel that link the architect to masonry, and there is also a pentagram within a circle. The emptiness is the real resident of this deserted location, regardless of whether or not it is haunted. The destruction of this zany architectural masterpiece exemplifies the excess of human desires, the fruitless endeavors to build a utopia on Earth. Saldaña really passed away from pneumonia at his residence a few months after stopping the building of this renowned hotel. according to the official and most plausible account of what transpired at the hotel. His once promising endeavor is now in shambles and remains unoccupied. Though it may seem like a complete mishmash of styles to some, others view it as a treasure trove of iconography that incorporates elements from all around the world, including the Mexican Revolution and Greek mythology. The end product is a one-of-a-kind, iconic building whose enigma continues to scare everyone brave enough to step foot inside. Reporters who have done their homework on the site have come forth with their predictions for the structure's eventual use. According to their claims, the ongoing political and legal struggle to sell it will never come to a close. The hotel is currently off-limits, notwithstanding its history as a film set and warehouse. The idea that it is cursed has, naturally, gained traction due to this. Since no one knows who placed the drawings, toys, and pictures on the altars within the structure, those who believe in the folklore believe it proves the building is haunted. All we can say is that the Posada del Sol is a real piece of architecture that has a chilling air of mystery and terror about it. On December 19, 1487, the sixth great temple of Tenochtitlan opened with a celebration no contemporary leader would anticipate. Eagle-clad warriors defended an imperial tiered pyramid, a hypnotic drumbeat. Nearly nude guys sang together. Festive atmosphere. The event culminated with prisoners of war being brought up the pyramid's steep stairs to two shrines. Holding the victims down, high priests with ceremonial knives cut open their abdomens and lifted their throbbing hearts to the spirits above, and the congregation in the holy precinct below. After being kicked down the steps, the sacrificial victims bled brilliant scarlet against the temple walls. During the 4-day opening ritual, 4,000 captives were slaughtered to appease the Aztec gods and deter anybody who might challenge this terrifying yet seductive American dominion. These events occurred in Mexico City just before Christmas 1487, fewer than 5 years before Christopher Columbus and his voyage set sail from Spain for India, which turned out to be a new world across the Atlantic Ocean. Europeans knew little about the Aztecs, and their famous 7 tribes' origins are still unclear. In the late 11th century, Tenochtitlan and Mexica may have moved from California to Mexico. We know they reached the Valley of Mexico and established Tenochtitlan on a swampy island around 1325. It shielded them against foes in a foreign place, like Venice. Tenochtitlan, like Venice, was erected on wooden piles deep below and became a city of canals, wonders, festivals, imperial ambition, and mystery. Aztecs lavished on sacred structures. Their terrible gods required human hearts and blood to please them. The main temple, Hueteocalli in Nahuatl, or Templo Mayor in Spanish, was built shortly after Tenochtitlan was founded. 6 rebuildings preceded Hernán Cortés' 1519 visit. It became larger with each rebuild. However, it remained an impressive stepped pyramid, with twin staircases leading to the sanctuaries of Huitzilopochtli, god of battle, and Tlaloc, god of rain and fertility. A smaller circular temple to Quetzalcoatl, the pre-Aztec snake deity, facing this major monument. After finishing the 6th temple in 1497, Aztec ruler Ahuitzotl expanded his realm. The Aztecs' logical urban design, excellent sanitation, flowing water, daily baths, dominating temples, and ravenous human sacrifice looked eternal. Hernán Cortés, who came from Cuba in 1519 during Moctezuma's rule, witnessed the 7th and last Templo Mayor restoration. Cortés witnessed astonishing things. According to Spanish records, this was the biggest of 78 structures in Tenochtitlan's holy precinct. Franciscan monk Bernardino de Sahagún saw Huitzilopochtli's idol behind a shrine curtain. It included honey-bonded seeds and human blood. The statue, clad in beautiful garments and wearing a gold crown, was displayed to the people during a celebration each year and eaten as their god of sun and battle. Cortés was fascinated by such encounters. Tenochtitlan's size, with 250,000 people, it was larger than any European metropolis, and its gold reserves. Despite their eagle soldiers and blood-hungry gods, the Aztecs were defeated by Spanish, cunning, weapons, and sickness. Cortés cut a smooth and merciless route through the Aztecs after being welcomed as Quetzalcoatl. Pedro de Alvarado, his second in command, imprisoned thousands of unarmed Aztec nobles in the holy precinct during a religious rite, and ordered his soldiers kill them after hearing of a plot to retaliate. This ended the Aztec Empire, Moctezuma, Tenochtitlan, and Templo Mayor. The conquistadores devastated Aztec cities after expelling the survivors, many of whom perished of Spanish smallpox. On top of the Templo Mayor and holy area stood a Catholic cathedral. Life continued when New Spain became Mexico. Tenochtitlan, the Templo Mayor, Aztec gods, and civilization were forgotten. Early excavations by pioneering Mexican archaeologist Leopold Batres in the late 19th century were cursory, and later digs between then and World War II were seen as a nuisance by residents of this central Mexico City neighborhood. Public interest and methodical excavation of the site started in the latter part of the 20th century. Men found an 8-ton stone disc portraying the dispersed limbs of the Aztec moon deity Coyolxauhqui in 1978. Eduardo Matos Moctezuma, a happy archaeologist, was allowed to explore the temple by presidential order. The contentious removal of colonial dwellings led to the discovery of hundreds of Aztec antiquities, leading to the construction of the Templo Mayor Museum by renowned Mexican architect Pedro Ramirez Vázquez, who incorporated pre-Columbian features into his designs. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Templo Mayor's excavation continues. Several levels of the temple from the early 14th century, royal apartments with built-in baths, the House of the Eagle Warriors, a priest school, and writhing sculptures of holy snakes and serpents have been found. Even so, countless artifacts and the tantalizing narrative of a people, culture, and religion that disappeared in an instant in the early 16th century remain buried under Mexico City's structures, monuments, and churches. Ingenuity and new archaeological methods will assist, but our understanding of the Aztecs will remain frustratingly insufficient for years. Folklore aside, memory cannot remember Ahuitzotl, Moctezuma, Tenochtitlan, or the frightening ceremonies that took place in and around the Templo Mayor 500 years ago. The Aztec people still exist, but their faces blend into Mexico City's masses.
Soon as possible, construction of the cutting-edge house got underway. There were dozens of construction workers assembled for the assignment. The construction was completed as quickly as possible, and people worked into the wee hours of the night to accomplish this goal. Tension and an unexplainable terror began to grip them as the structure continued to grow over the course of many months. All of a sudden, things became even more difficult. As the builders began to lose their tools, they began to point the finger at one another without being able to come up with any rational explanation for what was taking on. The builders arranged a conference at the building site in an attempt to find a solution. However, they ended up getting intoxicated, and except for 3 of them, nobody showed up to work the next day. Although one of them went to work on the higher level, the other 2 worked on the lower floor below them. A sharp cry was heard by the 2 people below, which was then followed by the sound of a body striking the pavement again. Fear could be evident in the man's eyes as he lay on the floor, as if he had seen a monstrous monster in the moments leading up to his death. In a short period of time following this tragic event, another builder fell out of one of the windows for no apparent reason. Despite the unfortunate events, the father did not halt the building of the home since he was so keen to complete it. He took his kid with him one day to demonstrate to her how far along the building process they were. While the girl was wondering about the home, she managed to go to the top level of the building during a brief period of attention. It was from that vantage point that the sound of the wheelchair rolling down one of the ramps at a quick pace was heard, which ultimately led to the girl falling out of the window and dying. Subsequently, the father committed himself in the same location a few days later. The Casa de la Zacatecana Museum in Querétaro is home to an extraordinary quantity of art and interior design from the 17th century that has been meticulously conserved. However, because to a long-standing local tale, it is also a little bit creepy around here. It is said that the home was formerly occupied by a married couple whose relationship terminated under strange circumstances. The tale states that the pair's relationship ended due to the fact that her spouse was off for business for a significant amount of time. Rumors of her cheating started to spread. Eventually, the husband vanished totally. Reportedly, the spirits of the couple are still said to be roaming the hallways of the building. After hearing about the tale, collector Jose Antonio Origel Aguayo purchased the home and transformed it into a personal museum. He embellished the house with antiques and decor that dated from the 17th to the 20th century. At the same time as entering the museum is like invading on the private lives of a wealthy family from the city's history. Each exhibit in the museum exudes an aura of the eerie. You will come across a variety of items, such as a picture depicting the souls of purgatory, a vase adorned with the face of Medusa, chairs adorned with dragons, and even dining room cabinets that are supported by what look to be elves. It is not difficult to see why the home has been embroiled in rumors of strange occurrences. It is possible that the presence of 53 crucifixes on the wall at the entrance to the bedroom is intended to convey the sense of heaviness that pervades the environment. However, the most frightening aspect of the museum is located in the backyard, where one of the windows has a spooky optical illusion. This is undoubtedly the most intriguing aspect of the museum. The reflection in one of the high windows gives the impression that it is a woman's face when seen from a certain angle. The anima is the name given to this optical illusion, which is said to be one of the ghosts that hang around at this frightening museum.
A Mexican lady named Claudia Mijangos Arzac was found guilty of filicide. Mijangos killed her 3 children by stabbing them to death in April 1989, claiming that she was forced to do it by a demonic force that was inside of her. She was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy and schizoaffective disorder. As a result, she received the maximum punishment for this kind of offense in Mexico, which is 30 years in jail. After being freed from jail in 2019, Mijangos checked himself into a mental health facility. She committed the crime in a haunted home. Born in Sinaloa, Mexico, on May 25, 1956, Claudia Mijangos was up in an upper-middle-class household. She was crowned Mazatlan's beauty queen when she was younger. She married Alfredo Castaños Gutierrez after earning her commerce degree. 3 kids were born to them. The family relocated to Querétaro City, Querétaro, after inheriting a substantial sum of money after the death of her parents. Claudia Mijangos taught catechism at Colegio Fray Luis de León, a Catholic school where the three kids were enrolled. Later, Claudia set her shop downtown selling clothes. Claudia and her husband Alfredo started experiencing marital issues in the late 1980s. According to friends and family, she started exhibiting symptoms of emotional instability. Dr. Jaime Flores provided marital therapy to the couple. In 1989, Claudia and Alfredo split up. In the months before the killings, Claudia started having severe psychotic episodes when she was 33 years old. Claudia apparently suffered mentally as a result of these assaults, which included hallucinations of angels and devils. Claudia's husband brought their kids to her home after picking them up from a school fair on April 23, 1989. Castaños and Claudia got into a heated quarrel there. He expressed his need to reconcile and questioned her about Father Ramon. In a fit of rage, Claudia stood up for Father Ramon and denied Castaños' want to resume their relationship. Castaños was warned by Claudia that he would regret his actions before he departed. Claudia locked the door behind him and walked upstairs to put her kids to bed before falling asleep. Claudia woke up to loud voices in her brain a few hours later, on April 24, 1989, at around 4 in the morning. She said that all of Querétaro was a spirit, and that the voices informing her that Mazatlan had vanished. Claudia contacted her friend Veronica Vázquez in a panic, and she was told to relax. Veronica said she would assist her in the morning. After the call, Claudia got out of bed, dressed, and, with her kids still asleep, proceeded to the kitchen to get 3 knives. Claudia assaulted her 6-year-old son Alfredo with a knife at about 5 in the morning. She took hold of his left hand and severed it whole as she was leaning on his bed. When Alfredo shouted, his older sister Claudia Maria, age 11, entered to the room and pleaded with her mother to stop. Claudia hurried up to her oldest daughter and stabbed her 6 times while switching blades. After suffering injuries, Claudia Maria was able to exit the room and loudly begged her mother for forgiveness. The neighbors were awakened by the screaming. Ana Belen, age 9, was stabbed in the heart by Claudia, who stole the 3rd knife. Claudia rushed downstairs to find Claudia Maria, who had been stabbed once again after fainting on the dining room floor. Afterward, she pulled her upstairs and put her dead corpse in the master bedroom. Castañeda General Asylum, the biggest mental health hospital in Mexico, gained notoriety for the terrible circumstances and cruel treatment its inmates endured. In their fury, relatives took their demand for immediate assistance to the highest echelons of government. Although it was Mexico's biggest mental health facility, Porfirio Díaz's La Castañeda General Asylum was notorious for its inmates' brutal treatment and terrible living circumstances. As a result of their fury, family members took their petition to the highest levels in order to have their immediate needs met. There have been a number of initiatives in Mexico in recent years demanding more effective mental health services and treatment for the 15 million individuals who are living with mental illness. But in bygone eras, mental institutions had a bad reputation for the way they treated their patients and the environment in which they operated. The General Asylum of La Castañeda stood out among them. Before La Castañeda was built, there were already 2 institutions that specifically dealt with mental disease. Built in the Plaza de San Fernando in the heart of the city at the start of the colonial era, the San Hipólito Hospital, also called the Plaza de los Locos, was the first mental hospital in America. El Divino Salvador was the name of the second sanatorium that was open only to women. It was generally known as La Canoa, due to its location on Canoa Street, which is now Donceles, near the Iturbide Theater. Both structures served as barracks and military hospitals during the social and political upheavals of the 19th century. This is why those who needed medical attention were either transported to the presidios or abandoned on the streets. General Porfirio Díaz's ascent to power coincided with the healthcare system's hopes for modernization. The Manicomio General project was so proposed in 1878, although it was not started by Diaz himself until 1910. From that point on until the middle of the 20th century, it was Mexico's preeminent mental institution. It was constructed on property that belonged to a pulque hacienda called La Castañeda in the area that was formerly called Mixcoac. No stranger to the moniker, the Palace of Madness, than this establishment. It held a diverse group of violent and mentally ill individuals, regardless of their age, race, religion, or nationality. They were to be reintegrated into society when their disorders were treated. Its psychiatric clinics served as a teaching tool for medical students, and the production of academic articles and other scholarly works encouraged introspection, organization, and communication inside the institution. Several groups of patients were assigned to various areas. Patients were admitted to different pavilions according to their condition. The first-class distinguished pavilion treated all patients equally. The observation pavilion housed the poor and second- and third-class pensioners. A section was set aside for addicts, and the dangerous pavilion housed prisoners, whose safety was questionable, as well as violent and agitated individuals. Patients with contagious diseases, homosexuals, prostitutes, and epileptic seizures were housed in separate wards from the imbeciles and patients with epilepsy. La Castañeda's notoriety is derived on accounts of injustice and cruelty. The documents sent by individuals to the Secretaría de Salubridad y Asistencia, or the Secretaría de Gobernación, regarding bad practices, questionable treatment, and abuse of its inmates can be found in the Presidential Archives collection of the Archivo General de la Nación, AGN. Images from the Hermanos Mayo collection, a group of journalists whose work is now part of the AGN's graphic collections, document the last and most recent accounts of the features of daily life in a building that, despite the many negative associations with it, until its 1968 closure, was a turning point in Mexico's psychiatric practice. The La Castañeda General Asylum, the biggest mental health hospital in Mexico, gained notoriety for the terrible circumstances and cruel treatment its inmates endured. In their fury, relatives took their demand for immediate assistance to the highest echelons of government. Although it was Mexico's biggest mental health facility, Porfirio Díaz's La Castañeda General Asylum was notorious for its inmates' brutal treatment and terrible living circumstances. As a result of their fury, family members took their petition to the highest levels in order to have their immediate needs met. There have been a number of initiatives in Mexico in recent years demanding more effective mental health services and treatment for the 15 million individuals who are living with mental illness. But in bygone eras, mental institutions had a bad reputation for the way they treated their patients and the environment in which they operated. The General Asylum of La Castañeda stood out among them. Before La Castañeda was built, there were already two institutions that specifically dealt with mental disease. Built in the Plaza de San Fernando in the heart of the city at the start of the colonial era, the San Hipólito Hospital, also called the Plaza de los Locos, was the first mental hospital in America. El Divino Salvador was the name of the second sanatorium that was open only to women. It was generally known as La Canoa, due to its location on Canoa Street, which is now Donceles, near the Iturbide Theater. Both structures served as barracks and military hospitals during the social and political upheavals of the 19th century. This is why those who needed medical attention were either transported to the presidios or abandoned on the streets. General Porfirio Díaz's ascent to power coincided with the healthcare system's hopes for modernization. The Manicomio General project was so proposed in 1878, although it was not started by Diaz himself until 1910. From that point on until the middle of the 20th century, it was Mexico's preeminent mental institution. It was constructed on property that belonged to a pulque hacienda, called La Castañeda, in the area that was formerly called Mixcoac. No stranger to the moniker, the Palace of Madness, than this establishment. It held a diverse group of violent and mentally ill individuals, regardless of their age, race, religion, or nationality. They were to be reintegrated into society when their disorders were treated. Its psychiatric clinics served as a teaching tool for medical students, and the production of academic articles and other scholarly works encouraged introspection, organization, and communication inside the institution. Several groups of patients were assigned to various areas. Patients were admitted to different pavilions according to their condition. The first-class distinguished pavilion treated all patients equally. The observation pavilion housed the poor and second- and third-class pensioners. A section was set aside for addicts, and the dangerous pavilion housed prisoners, whose safety was questionable, as well as violent and agitated individuals. Patients with contagious diseases, homosexuals, prostitutes, and epileptic seizures were housed in separate wards from the imbeciles and patients with epilepsy. La Castañeda's notoriety is derived on accounts of injustice and cruelty. The documents sent by individuals to the Secretaría de Salubridad y Asistencia, or the Secretaría de Gobernación, regarding bad practices, questionable treatment, and abuse of its inmates can be found in the Presidential Archives collection of the Archivo General de la Nación, AGN. Images from the Hermanos Mayo collection, a group of journalists whose work is now part of the AGN's graphic collections, document the last and most recent accounts of the features of daily life in a building that, despite the many negative associations with it, until its 1968 closure, was a turning point in Mexico's psychiatric practice. Scholars have spent a great deal of time trying to piece together clues about the Mayans' long-lost civilization. The early Spanish colonizers' eradication of the language has made deciphering hieroglyphs a difficult and laborious process. The Mayans who lived at Chichen Itza, like many other ancient civilizations, had beliefs and practices that were drastically different from our own. Their ceremonies and manner of life seem savage and gloomy to us, but it was the way they honored, spoke with, and appeased their deities. For the Mayans, death had a special meaning. Contrary to popular belief, they had a far more positive impression of it. During that period, suicide was sometimes desired, and even celebrated, since people saw it as a necessary step on the road to the afterlife. The enormous scale of the ball court is one thing that sets Chichen Itza's Mayan ruins apart from those in Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala. These arenas were constructed to accommodate a large number of spectators who would enthusiastically applaud, while two teams competed in a one-of-a-kind activity that included flinging a tiny ball through a circular hoop using the hips. In one strange twist, the victorious team's leader was beheaded at the conclusion of a game where teams fought to the death. Carved onto the stones that surround the big ball court at Chichen Itza are representations of this kind of death, which was considered a tremendous honor. The sculptures depict armored warriors participating in the game, with one figure genuflecting with snakes dangling from his severed head, representing the blood spurting from his main arteries. The Mayans often engaged in ritual sacrifice. People routinely and regularly sacrificed blood during times of illness, drought, and hunger, because they believed it would placate the gods. Situated below the main pyramid, El Castillo, the enormous cenote, sinkhole, is one part of Chichen Itza that captivated early scholars and still does today. This spot clearly had great religious significance for the Mayans. Jade, which the Mayans valued as much as gold, was among many treasures that they placed into its depths. The Mayans may have seen this cenote as a conduit to the underworld and a meeting place between the rain deity Chac and the underworld. At the base of the cenote, along with priceless artifacts, were discovered hundreds of bones, among them those of several children. To placate the rain god and, maybe, end the Maya people's terrible drought, it is said that these victims were sacrificed and lowered into the cenote from above. The huge pyramids of Chichen Itza, particularly the Central Pyramid, often referred to as El Castillo, are thought to have housed further ritual sacrifices. Here, captives taken during battle would have been the most common victims at the top temple level of the pyramid. More artwork inside Chichen Itza captures the magnitude and savagery of these sacrifices. It depicts rows of posts bearing pierced skulls, a formidable sign of authority and a warning to visitors. Many visitors to Chichen Itza have reported seeing ghosts or shadow figures wandering the grounds and within the pyramids. Some think these are the damned spirits of those who were sacrificed here, destined to wander the grounds forever. Some have speculated that they could be priests who have remained to preserve their holy location. Another piece of evidence supporting this hypothesis is the claim that the observatory, rather than the temples of sacrifice, is the most paranormally active location in Chichen Itza. The Mayans were world-class astrologers because of their remarkable accuracy in predicting the future. This was a monumental undertaking, and it's possible that the dead are still carrying it out. There have been a plethora of further reports of paranormal activity in Chichen Itza. A lot of people have reported paranormal experiences, including cold spots, voices and noises that don't seem to be there, and even the sound of long-lost tribal chants. Unsettling experiences of spiritual attachment have also been recorded online by guests. Legend has it that long-gone ghosts have accompanied tourists home, where they continue to torment them in their nightmares. Pictures circling the scorching skies overhead as you drive down a winding, overgrown dirt road is not exactly a pleasant entrance. Houses, a church, and even a defunct pool are among the several surviving buildings in the town. The severe weather, years of neglect, and, most notably, vandalism, have worn everything down to its bare bones. Although lizards have taken up residence at Misnebalam, the site may still be haunted by the spirits of those who formerly lived there. While it is not uncommon for structures to be abandoned in Mexico, the specific conditions that left Misnebalam's whole town in ruins are unprecedented. According to urban legends, the inhabitants of Misnebalam were forced to abandon their houses and means of subsistence due to the presence of ghosts. A sad tale is the most common ghost story associated with Misnebalam. In this sleepy rural town in the 1920s, there lived a little boy named Juliancito, who was 9 years old and the son of a farm laborer. Juliancito was kidnapped and raped by a fellow worker in the town as he was playing with a ball of yarn one day. He was distressed because his youthful mind couldn't cope with the shock. Juliancito tragically committed himself by tying himself to a tree in the town. Legend has it that the place he once called home is haunted by the ghost of a lost youth. According to several accounts and even video evidence, his specter is among the most active at Misnebalam. It is reported that Don Marquez, the previous landowner of Misnebalam, too had a ghostly visitation. Supposedly, ever since his tragic death in 1921, Don has loomed over the community. Along with his son and one of his employees, Don set off from his house in October of this year and traveled along a road towards Misnebalam. Unknown assassins boarded his vehicle while he was on the road and murdered Don in broad daylight. Ever since this day, people in the community that Don formerly ruled over have reported seeing his spirit. Misnebalam is home to more than just ghosts. It is also the haunted house of a priest. He is often seen inside the dilapidated, roofless chapel. Typically, his specter is shown rising to the peak of the remaining church, clad in a long, billowing black robe. There, he seems to be welcoming guests with outstretched arms. Disembodied voices, other unexplained sounds, and the apparition of light anomalies and orbs are among the most paranormal occurrences recorded inside Misnebalam. Even though there is no power, light bulbs, or wiring left in abandoned homes. Several have reported that the lights inside still turning on at night. In the middle of a desert in California, a tourist who remains nameless is seen driving along a roadway. In a state of exhaustion, he comes upon Hotel California and makes the decision to spend the night there. When he is heading up to the hotel, he meets a lady who walks him down a hallway to his room. Along the way, he hears strange voices greeting him to the hotel and discussing the amenities that the hotel provides. Subsequently, he observes people dancing wildly in the courtyard of the hotel. When he contacts the captain from his room at the hotel, he requests for some wine, only to find out that the hotel has not sold wine since 1969. He is disappointed to learn this information. As he is attempting to get some rest, he is jolted awake by the same creepy noises that come from the hallway. After some time has passed, the lady who was there before informs the visitor that everyone in the hotel is a captive of their own devices. The traveler joins the other occupants in the master's room for dinner, and the words of the song imply that the other residents started stabbing a monster. The traveler is also there for the meal. The terrified tourist flees and makes many unsuccessful efforts to escape the hotel, only to return to the hotel. According to Nightman, he is unable to leave the hotel and will remain there for the rest of his life. The song is an allegory about hedonism and self-destruction in the Southern California music industry of the late 1970s. Don Henley called it "our interpretation of the high life in Los Angeles," and later reiterated, "It's basically a song about the dark underbelly of the American dream and about excess in America, which is something we knew a lot about." In the year 2008, Don Felder provided an explanation of the lyrics' beginnings. The majority of the words were written by Don Henley and Glenn. During the night, we all sort of drove into Los Angeles. Nobody was from California, and if you drive into LA at night, you can just see this glow on the horizon of lights, and the thoughts that start racing through your brain of Hollywood and all the fantasies that you had. And so it was sort of about that, what we began writing the song about. Coming into Los Angeles, and from that, life in the fast lane and wasted time, and a whole lot of other songs came out of that. Over the course of the years, listeners have developed their own interpretations of the lyrics due to the abstract nature of the lyrics. A number of Christian preachers said in the 1980s that the term Hotel California referred to a hotel in San Francisco that had been bought by Anton Szandor LaVey and subsequently transformed into the Church of Satan establishment. Several other stories indicated that the Camarillo State Mental Hospital was the location of the Hotel California instead. The band has categorically refuted these allegations on several occasions. Whispering winds that blow across the Sierra de Juarez are the source of the term. These winds have the potential to bring about instantaneous tragedy for those who do not drive with proper attention along the winding course that it takes. The highway has been referred to as Mexico's most hazardous roadway, and it is also considered to be among the most hazardous roads in the whole world. These assertions are supported by tabloid television, which not only exaggerates the perilous aspect of the route, but also emphasizes the area's reputation for being a place where supernatural occurrences are known to occur. Those who drive, nowadays, are thought to be haunted by the spirits of those who lost their lives on the road. The legend is further inflamed by assertions that are exaggerated about the number of deaths. Although it was a two-lane highway until the 1980s, the route was certainly more hazardous in the past. It is stated that anybody who is above a certain age and lives in the surrounding region is aware of someone who has lost their life as a result of an accident that occurred on this road. The road that is now in use continues to spiral along a complex pattern in both directions. There are several cautions posted on the signs that provide guidance on how to navigate the twists and bends in the most secure manner. And further dismal reminder of how not to drive properly, is provided by a peek at the chunks of twisted metal that have been abandoned some distance below. It is possible for motorists to pull over at a number of different spots in order to take in the scenery and, if required, sound the alarm. It was a long time ago when a truck driver was driving at full speed towards Mexicali on the La Rumorasa highway. He was doing so because his wife was about to give birth, and he wanted to get home as soon as possible. He had money for whatever was offered to him, and when he was about to take a dangerous curve, he lost control of his vehicle and crashed into some rocks. The driver emerged from the trailer in a state of complete disbelief, examined his body, and was relieved to see that he had not been injured in any previous incident. Therefore, he waited for someone to come by and either assist him or transport him to the city. But for a considerable amount of time, no one proceeded to traverse those hills. The man went to sleep, and when he awoke, he was surprised to see that everything was dark. He did not comprehend what was taking place, so he made the decision to walk. He walked, and he made a significant amount of progress. He was aware that the exit of the rumor was close, but when he remembered that he was still in the same location where the accident had occurred, he was surprised to find himself there. In the end, after 3 days, they discovered the vehicle, but they could not find the driver. There was no trace of him. That is, until one day, many years later, a little kid who was hauling a trailer came to a halt when a guy motioned him over. In the 1920s, people went to the borders for drinks and fun during U.S. Prohibition. Border communities become hubs for smuggling and thirst-quenching businesses. A golden period and expansion occurred in Tijuana, a border town. People from over the globe gathered to their casino to drink and watch horse racing and bullfighting. Conservatives termed Tijuana Sin City, or Satan's playground. The need for a good time was lucrative and drew many people south of the border. Thus, several resorts were built. Agua, Calyente Casino, and hotel debuted in 1928. In the 1930s, American celebrities, Mexican politicians, diplomats, criminals, and gamblers flocked to it like Monte Carlo and Deauville. This was Tijuana's golden period. The hotel in Tijuana, Mexico, in Baja California, is reputed to be haunted, although its beauty is now long forgotten. Many ghost tales originate from high school students. Many legends exist, notably concerning a lady going by a pupil without touching the earth. La Faraona is this ghost's folklore. At Agua Calyente, performers might be found and succeed. While performing at the hotel, Rita Hayworth was one. Her Hollywood career made her a cultural legend. Not all performers left Tijuana. Some say a female entertainer haunts the previous hotel constructed on a hot spring. She sang in several variations, but the most comprehensive legends describe her dancing in a popular performance. Spanish flamenco dancer. The school's tales named her La Faraona, her stage name as a star in one of the Agua Calyente casino's numerous shows. Her presence at the casino tables was also said to bring luck. Her numerous admirers sent her jewels and jewelry, and there are legends that she concealed her valuables in the minaret, where her ghost has been seen many times. She was dating a resort employee. The British nobleman known as Mr. Patrick earned money smuggling booze. Some say he was in Al Capone's mob. Everything ended tragically when La Faraona murdered him. Her motives vary, but poison is typically involved. In some instances, she poisons merely him, but in others, both. She allegedly poisoned her boyfriend after taking his money, or realizing he wouldn't take her to England. Some say she saw him with another lady. After poisoning him, she laughed in his face and informed him there was an antidote she wouldn't give him. He chased her, but couldn't grab the antidote. He shot and murdered her. He perished too, since he never found the poison's antidote. Or she poisoned their beverages and killed them. they haunt the motel where they died. Historical records show just one homicide at the Agua Calyente, but we will never know how many more occurred. An Agua Calyente dancer who had worked there for 4 months was discovered on March 26, 1934. Esperanza Lopez was discovered killed in a casino artist cottage. Rodrigo Prieto, her hotel worker husband, shot her. The hotel closed in 1938 when the states abolished gambling bans and Mexico banned it. After the structure became Lázaro Cárdenas High School, most scary legends emerged from there. Since she never leaves Agua Calyente, the schoolchildren insist on seeing her ghost. The continental U.S.'s oldest masonry fort, 2 forbidden lovers' spirits are forever bound in the web they created in America's oldest city. The 1672 Spanish military fort, Castillo de San Marcos, is the setting for a love tale. Betraying Colonel Garcia Martí's trust cost both eternally. Visitors may see, hear, and smell these two in the historic fort. The strongest unidentified aroma in passers-by's nostrils is the most noticeable indication. Stories began when 2 skeletons were unearthed in an underground dungeon. We strive to solve the mystery of Castillo de San Marcos's 2 abandoned lovers, who have enthralled St. Augustine visitors for decades. One of 2 coquina limestone forts in the globe, the Spanish fort was built in 1672. It was built to protect St. Augustine, a Spanish jewel and Atlantic trade route. The invaders were close. The oldest European settlement in the U.S., St. Augustine, was established in 1565 and has withstood numerous trials. Pirate raids were rising, therefore a small wooden fort was erected in 1668. The town almost starved. 8 years had passed since the Spanish crown offered situados to the little town. People were struggling, infrastructure was deteriorating, and over 400,000 pesos were due. These conditions allowed a pirate ship camouflaged as a situados to enter the city. The assault killed 60, requiring a new fort. Only some regions yield coquina limestone, built by coquina clam donax shells for millennia. The Spanish had easy access to this rock but seldom used it. St. Augustine residents were largely soldiers, not masons. After the 1688 siege of St. Augustine and government pressure, the appropriate merchants went to the New World. Building lasted 1672-1695. A large courtyard and 12 19-foot walls sheltered St. Augustine citizens. The construction was useful and sustainable. Charleston Governor James Moore attacked St. Augustine in 1702, 7 years after completion. Cannon blast bounced against coconut walls. The English again attempted to take St. Augustine in 1740. The fort withstood the bombing. After the 7 Years' War, Spain lost St. Augustine in 1763. British and Spanish swapped. The English gained Florida for La Habana. After U.S. freedom 20 years later, Spain regained the city and fort. Here come our melancholy loves. Colonel Garcia Martí and his lovely young wife Dolores came at Castillo de San Marcos. He was notable, busy, maybe more concerned with job than love. A bit older than his attractive young wife. Young lovers, read this to treat your mate nicely on Valentine's Day. He worked with younger Dolores-like assistant Captain Abella. Abella was gorgeous and lively, therefore Dolores loved him and vice versa. Dolores adored perfumes and used them often. Her cheerful scents filled the fort, and everyone enjoyed them. It attracted Captain Young. Colonel Martí smelled his wife's strong aroma throughout Abella. One night, Martí envied the soldiers leaving for town and allowed it get to him. Fortress soldiers loved Dolores and Captain Abella. After many days, they naturally wondered where they were. They were long missing. Martí persuaded his soldiers that Dolores was ill in St. Augustine and sent to Mexico to recover, while the young captain was sent to Cuba on a special assignment. Despite his confusion, Everyone trusted the colonel's story. The fort operated normally for years. A young lieutenant observed something peculiar about the dungeon structure when American soldiers took over Castillo de San Marcos after Florida joined the U.S. Hollow wall. He broke the brick wall out of curiosity. He smelled a lady and found 2 convicts' bones. These bones exist in the fort, despite no proof they belong to Dolores and Abela. The dungeon smells like Dolores and has flashing lights, orbs, and apparitions along the bones wall. Maybe the most essential lesson from this story is to not overlook your family. Love lasts forever. Therefore, they'll find another. A few remaining relics of the Aztec civilization may be found inside the boundaries of Mexico City, which is one of the largest metropolitan areas in the world. The UNESCO World Heritage Site, known as Xochimilco, is comprised of a massive network of canals and little man-made islands, known as chinampas. These chinampas are where the residents live and have their crops grown. Located deep inside the heart of Xochimilco, there is a chinampa that contains a few modest cottages, but they are overwhelmed by hundreds of dolls that have been disfigured and are rotting. The island of the dolls, also known as La Isla de las Muñecas, is the location where the greatest collection of haunted dolls available anywhere in the world can be found. However, it is possible that the only item that is actually haunted in this tale is the guy who lived there, a recluse by the name of Don Julian Santana Barrera. According to the legend, he was purportedly haunted by the soul of a girl who had drowned. Before Don Julian arrived there in the 1950s, it was not known as the Island of the Dolls. Nevertheless, it became recognized as such shortly after, when dolls began to magically materialize on the island. A little girl is said to have tragically perished in the canal's water lilies decades before his arrival, according to a legend that has been passed down through the generations. It was Don Julian who said that he had heard the girl yelling from beyond the grave, "I want my doll." In point of fact, he discovered a doll close to the location where her corpse was said to have been discovered. He then proceeded to hang the doll on a tree, as if to make a sacrifice to the ghost of the little girl. Don Julian developed a fixation on her and was plagued by her presence. After that, he said that each time he walked outdoors, he found fresh dolls that were hung up from trees. Not all of them were totally whole, however. Some of them had their heads severed, while others had their bodies mutilated. In an attempt to calm the restless spirit of the little girl, Don Julian scattered more dolls over the island when his crops failed to provide the desired results. Eventually, he grew obsessed with this grotesque shrine. Every day, Don Julian would spend his time searching through garbage dumps and fishing in the waterways for antique dolls that had been abandoned. Additionally, he would swap his veggies for them in the past. To create the horrifying image that we see today, Don Julian hung the dolls in the different stages of disrepair that he discovered them in. This, in conjunction with the fact that they were exposed to the weather, produced the scenario. The next 50 years or more, he proceeded to construct this forest of dolls throughout the course of his life. It is possible that Don Julian felt them to be protecting, despite the fact that we have referred to them as haunted. In the year 2001, Don Julian passed away in close proximity to the location where the little girl had passed away. There are many who believe that he had a heart attack, while others believe that he met the same fate as she did and drowned. The ghost of the girl is reported to continue to haunt the island even to this day, and many people think that it was the girl's spirit that was responsible for his death. The dread of dolls is known as pediophobia, and it is believed that the blank but realistic glances that dolls have on their faces are the root cause of this anxiety. The island of the dolls, on the other hand, seems to terrify a wide variety of people, not just those who are afraid of children. Furthermore, It is a source of intrigue for other people and has become a well-liked tourist destination in recent years. People in the area assert that the dolls come to life at night, bringing with them the ghosts of those who have passed on. It is said that the dolls make noises such as whispering, whistling, moving their limbs, and turning their heads on their own volition in an attempt to entice those who are not cautious to drown in the canals of the island. Others claim that it is only the wind. They claim that it is a good idea to give the dolls a present as soon as you step foot on the island, regardless of the circumstances. In the event that you do not, it is possible that you may experience the same destiny as Don Julian Santana Barrera. They claim that it is a good idea to give the dolls a present as soon as you step foot on the island, regardless of the circumstances. In the event that you do not, it is possible that you may experience the same destiny as Don Julian Santana Barrera.